Uko kuno abo bano mama wanna get it night I know pura meso I know pura zebe I know kaya marigi
Right, 29 September 2022, and today I've got a very, very complicated matter to deal with. And this is because it's very emotional. The issue that we're discussing here is going to shape the direction of our country, both for the opposition and for the ruling ZANU-PF party. Specifically, I have been saying that in the 2023 elections, the CCC is going to try to paint ZANU-PF as a violent party in such a manner that eventually there'll be intervention from outside the country. So keep this in mind as I speak about what is happening now. Eventually, the 2023 elections is either going to be supervised by the United Nations and other international organizations, may fail to happen, or there could be a combination or a number of permutations which all involve violence. And I want to specifically say violence won't be coming from the side of ZANU-PF, because at the stage where we've reached in Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF is no longer superior in terms of violence. If there was to be violence in Zimbabwe right now, it is possible that ZANU-PF might end up on the losing side of that violence, physically on the street, on the ground. And I want to take you back to what I said when Mo Blessing Ali died, or was killed, was murdered. Mo Blessing Ali was murdered by a private individual, not by ZANU-PF. This is known. The individual was arrested. In fact, this was not a political killing, but the way it was turned around and why Job Sikhala was arrested is because he made it a political killing. And remember, I'm not taking sides. I want to show you what happened, and I want you to understand why Job Sikhala was arrested. I don't think it's justified for him to be in jail, but I want to take you through what the security structures must have been thinking. And I want to take you through a number of short videos. So let's start with this short clip, whereby after the disappearance of Mo Blessing Ali, there was a rampage by CCC supporters in Chitungwiza. So I want to show you one short clip and then another. Right, those were CCC supporters searching for Mo Blessing Ali. There was a number of incidents, and then on the day of the funeral, Job Sikhala and a number of other people organized a number of trucks to ferry youths to Nyatsime, and the police were overpowered. They ended up standing on the side. I showed you this video before. Right, so I don't need to keep playing that video. You have seen it before. Eventually, the house of the ZANU-PF chairperson was torched during that particular incident. So, obviously, as I said, I want to cover the political, the legal, and what is going to happen next. What are the potential ramifications or implications of what is happening with Job Sikhala and the Nyatsime 14. So let me conclude on this issue that I was addressing, the issue of violence. The bigger picture here is that violence is going to be a factor. The perception of violence and who has got the muscle. And at the moment, ZANU-PF is not able to apply violence to any successful end. They will lose. If ZANU-PF tries anything violent, they will lose. If ZANU-PF tries to apply violence, they will lose one way, which is the international community will say ZANU-PF is violent, and international supervision will be brought upon the election in Zimbabwe. If they physically go on the streets and try to be violent, this time around, they do not know the outcome. It's not clear what is going to happen with that violence. It will end up very, very badly for ZANU-PF. So ZANU-PF is not the source of violence. And remember what happened in Zambia. It is the Zambia playbook. By the time Lungu came out, he was so unpopular because he was perceived to be violent, to be murderous, to be using the military for oppressing the population. So the bigger picture is to apply the same template on Zimbabwe. That is what is going to happen. The same template that was applied in Zambia is going to be applied in Zimbabwe. And by the time the election comes, you are going to see that without doing anything, the CCC is going to become more and more popular in the rural areas, in the urban areas, because they are going to be seen as violent people. Everything else won't matter. All the projects that they're doing, all the work that President Mnangagwa is doing, it will mean nothing. The only thing that will matter by the time we got the elections is the violence and the use of state apparatus. So most of the things that you're going to see are going to be a provocation of a response. And so the way that ZANU-PF is going to respond to the provocation is going to be very, very important. And remember, I don't take sides. I do not benefit anything from anybody. I only tell you what you need to know. So the bigger picture is that by the time that we got the elections, the perception of violence is going to be very, very important. And now let's go to the legal issues. Why were these guys denied bail? If you go to gambako.com right now, you're going to see a very detailed judgment. This is the story at the top. You're going to see a very detailed judgment from the High Court of Zimbabwe explaining why bail was not granted. Bail was not granted for the Nyatsime 14, specifically because they did not go to the right court. That is why they were denied bail. There are other issues, obviously, the magistrate court. They were denied bail there. But then they took their application for changed circumstances to the High Court. A wrong court. Senior lawyers, they know this. They know that you can't do that. We've handled this issue before, during the time when the name of the MDC and MDC alliance was being argued, that you cannot go to the wrong court and expect the court to rule in your favor. So you can read that judgment. It's very, very long. They went to the wrong court. The lawyers did not appear. They did not come to court on a number of occasions. They delayed everything. It's almost as if these guys were outside wanted the guys who are inside to stay there. Read this judgment and you understand what I mean. If these guys had just approached the right court, right now, if they go back to the magistrate court, there will be a different outcome. But they did not approach the right court. And this is what ended up with these guys being stuck there. Otherwise, the magistrate's court was going to have to reconsider the case. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm telling you what I know and what I perceive from this long judgment here. And the lawyers here was Tim Pofu for the applicants and Nyahunji for the respondent. So the respondents, there are quite a bunch of them here. You see it if you go to gambako.com. What is my point? My point is that we've got a political legal case on our hands, but it's also a military and a strategic case. President Mnangagwa is going to be tested by this case. And as I said, we are going to see that when we go to the elections, nothing else will matter. Everything that will matter is the perception of violence. And also, you are seeing the creation here of a victim. So the CCC is going to be a very, very big victim going into the elections, which is the Zambia playbook. The loss that Lungu suffered in Zambia was over 73%. He was not loved by anybody. The cadres, the use of cadres in its publication was such that no one wanted Lungu anymore. Everything that he'd done was undone by the use of force, or the perception of the use of force, and the victimization of President Hakainde Hichilema, or the candidate at that time. You remember when we were publishing, as we moved closer to the Zambian election, they became more and more desperate. The Lungu government became more and more desperate, and they lost control. And people in the military structures of Zambia started to sell out. So you could see people, there is a general on top, and the guys underneath, they started to sell out and go and cut deals at night with President Hakainde Hichilema. And he said it himself when he was inaugurated, that they started to work with people in the structures. Why? Because first, there was poverty within the ranks. And then there was a realization that the broader masses in Zambia were no longer feeling comfortable with the heavy-handed approach that was being used by President Hakainde Hichilema. So that's isolation. How do you isolate somebody until they're left naked with nothing? This is what happened in Zambia. By the time that President Lungu came out, he had lost all presidential appearance. You could look at him and you could see that this guy is ordinary. He's not a president. He was undressed. This is what happened in Zambia, and this is the template that is going to be applied here in Zimbabwe in the 2023 election. The template's purpose is to change the perception of the public and say this government is evil. And I wish I could play some of the videos of Job Sikhala during the funeral service of Mo Blessing Ali. And this case, as I said to you, nothing to do with ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF guys did not sit there and say, let's go and kill Mo Blessing Ali. That is a fact. She was killed in a private setting by somebody that she knows in a private capacity, nothing to do with the ZANU-PF. And yet it appeared as if ZANU-PF was being implicated. In fact, let me play this video. I want you to hear what I'm talking about. So let's let the advert play first. And then I want us to look at the exact words that Job Sikhala mentioned. And these are very powerful words, which have got strong ramifications for ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF has to be very, very strategic, because every campaign strategy of ZANU-PF is going to fail here. At this point, at this particular point of violence, not because they are violent, but just because the opponent knows how to apply the strategy of making sure that you look violent when you're not. And I know that violent, ZANU-PF guys are not violent. So let's play Sikhala and hear what he's saying here.
Asinyaya ndoda kutaura president yokuti nyaya iri kunyanya kutirwadza tiri kungourava gore negore. More blessing tinotenda Mwari mumugodhi waakanga akadirwa president uri pamusoro apo vanga vaunganidza dutu revhu rakadayo rokuti mweya waakanga wanawo wakanga wakuda kuchifutsira chinyi mugodhi uya, saka aigona kurova sezvakaita itaidza mari. Beta More blessing tamuwana. Kuna vamwe muno muZimbabwe since 1980 vasina kuwanikwa vakaurawa neZANU-PF. ZANU-PF has the history of killing citizens of this country. We know what they did during the period of Bukura Hunde. We know in 2000 they disappeared one of our members, Science Party Nyambanyana in Blawayo. Yes. They disappeared Itaidzamarana Nasati Zikwari. So zvatazokonkluda president agara pasi family vaditi iwo ndiannounce kuti munyengetero uno ndio gungano guru raitwa nokuti kune very crucial decision yakatorwa nemhuri kunzi uyu ativigiwe kusvika mabata vanhu vakamuponda.
Apologies there. I think most people who can listen very, very deeply, they understand what's going on here. ZANU-PF has got a big, big problem to deal with. They are being painted as violent people, and yet ZANU-PF is not violent. The ZANU-PF of President Mnangagwa is not violent. People are freely moving around. They're holding their rallies. They're doing everything that needs to be done. But the template that is being applied is such that ZANU-PF is going to end up looking violent, and they're going to be smeared all over the country. Wherever they walk, it will look like ZANU-PF is a violent party, and everyone wants them out as fast as possible. This is the template here, and it's going to be applied very, very successfully. And the CCC is now in a position where if there was a one-on-one combat with ZANU-PF, ZANU-PF will lose. And I mean, it's literally in the street. If you were to take 100 houses and say, ZANU-PF guys come out, and you say 100 houses, CCC guys come out, the CCC guys will be more than the ZANU-PF guys in the towns. Raw people are not going to fight anybody for anything. So that CCC is now a more violent party, or a more capable party to be violent or to defend themselves compared to ZANU-PF as it stands right now. And so what we are looking at here is a situation, or a catch-22 situation for ZANU-PF, and everything else is just going to be based on this issue. And now let's go to the strategy. The strategy of ZANU-PF and the reaction they have done here in terms of arresting Job Sikhala. And I've said this in the past when they arrested Job Sikhala. It looks minor, it looks like nothing. But these kind of things are going to eventually matter when the elections come and go. When the elections have come and have gone, ZANU-PF is going to find out that on the list, there's going to be Job Sikhala, there's going to be Tsitsi Dangarembwa, there's going to be a lot of other people. And when you stand there and say, I built 1 million roads, kilometers of roads, I did this and this and this, someone just going to come and say, do you know those guys? We need to remove them. They're murderers. Let them go. So strategically, it's important for ZANU-PF to understand where they are currently. They are in deep water here in terms of this situation. They need to reformulate their strategy. And they need to understand that there's a third force in operation. And the third force is not a simple structure. It's, as I said, a military, a business, and a political structure with the objective of making sure that the 2023 election is not held, or by the time it is held, there is more of a transition than an election. That is the purpose of the third force, which is in operation in Zimbabwe. And people in the third force are everywhere. People in the third force are among you, besides you, behind you, and in front of you, and on top of you. And you don't know where they're coming from. They are going to appear, and by the time they appear, you wonder where they came from. This is the kind of surprise situation which ZANU-PF finds itself in, because they are doing so well, but they are not appearing to do well. Everything that ZANU-PF is doing is being undone on a simple narrative of being violent, of being oppressive. And they are failing to handle that portion, that strategic portion of how do we transform ourselves to be someone loved. Because people love the Zimbabwe government, they love President Mnangagwa, but with this narrative of violence, ZANU-PF suddenly find themselves without a proper value proposition for the people. Because everywhere that Chamisa goes, he's just going to apply the Kwekwe strategy, the Gokwe strategy, the Masvingo strategy, where they run away from the air. You saw Stalo's video where he was driving away very fast. And say, we're being chased, we're being chased, we're being chased. But when you look on the back, there's no one chasing them. But that works because it's a perception being created. The perception that the opponent is so violent that they deserve to go. This is where ZANU-PF finds themselves in now, as we speak. And they need to handle it strategically. And not only strategically, politically, and in a military sense, because they will soon find themselves surrounded. Take this case of Job Sikhala. What is the purpose of keeping Job Sikhala in jail for so long? Do you know that when Mo Blessing Ali was arrested, the CCC for 17 days was searching for her, according to Job Sikhala. And they were using a number of intelligence and security people in their search. And some of the people that were there during that violent reaction, they were not caught. Why? Because the police were standing back. And you remember the same thing I said in Gokwe. This was not a simple matter. The police were overpowered. This is going to become an issue, that ZANU-PF is going to be called violent, but they can't apply the violence. So I think my point is met. This case is not simple, very complicated, and it's going to make a lot of difference in the election which is coming. You are not going to see a CCC which is going to rush into office, but you're going to see more of a third force that is going to make sure that by the time the election comes, you go into a transitional state, but not into an election state. And to do that, there is a number of permutations. And one of the permutations is to cause violence, or to allege violence, or to make it impossible to hold the elections. And that is the way that ZANU-PF will be ended, because then outsiders will come in and they'll supervise the election. The election cannot happen without supervision if this template is allowed, because the template's purpose is to make sure that the election is held under conditions that ZANU-PF don't control. And it's working. It's working very, very well. ZANU-PF suddenly in the press for the wrong reasons, despite all the African presidents going to the United Nations and saying, please remove sanctions. So this is almost like the counterpunch. I always tell you that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The CCC does not punch. The CCC uses Jiu-jitsu. They let you punch so hard that you trip over and fall by yourself. This is what they're doing here. And then they stand there and say, that guy hit me. And yet no one was hit. This is the situation. I said it when the first incident happened of the car, of the shooting. But as I said, lack of a structure is also a structure. Lack of a strategy is also a strategy. The problem is what happens after. What happens after all these things in 2023? Who is going to be leading? How are you going to structure a country? Are you going to get development? And how are you going to get buy-in from everybody? Because these are important issues. So I think we're done here. Let me look at the comments quickly. And I want to look at a few. You saw that Chamisa, BT, and the other guys are in America. I want to look at that next week. What is happening there? What is the implication then of Chamisa being in the States? Because it's part of a bigger picture. Is ZANU-PF seeing it? What is happening? Do they understand the implications of Chamisa being in America? And what it means in terms of the power that the CCC is going to get when they are able to apply and work with the United States of America. Not directly, but just getting their message across to the United States. That's very, very important to understand. Right, I'm looking for comments here. Right, let's look at Constance. Say, inga vana ID vanongo uraya vanhu wani vakasungwa nani. Right, Constance, who did ED kill? Honestly, these are some of the things that I'm talking about. The message that is coming across is very interesting to me. And I want this to be obviously clear. You all know that President Mnangagwa, ever since he came into office, he has never killed anybody. He's been the most accommodating president. In fact, he invited Chamisa to Poland. You remember that invitation was sent out and Poland was set up. The lack of dialogue in Zimbabwe over the past 4 years, it can be put squarely on Chamisa's door. And it's not that I'm speaking against Chamisa here. It's well known. And the lack of dialogue is what leads to violence. But as I said, violence will benefit one side and not the other. So this narrative of ZANU-PF being a killer party, that's not true. And ZANU-PF is just a normal and ordinary party. If you want to see killer parties, come here to South Africa. Google how many people were killed last month in KZN, politicians. And I'm not talking this out of, I'm talking about assassinations here in South Africa, not in Zimbabwe. The issue of killing is just a narrative. And ZANU-PF, these are some of the things that I say ZANU-PF need to deal with. They need to know how to deal with. ZANU-PF is not violent. It's in fact doing very progressive work, but they are going to lose on the perception because that is what is being created. Right, let's see, but Gambakwe, who violated the Gokwe Kabuyani Kwekwe incident, who was not violent. Ostalos, I showed you the video, Google it, gambakwe.com. Ostalos was standing a hand away from the murder. When that guy was murdered, Ostalos was standing there watching. Go and look at the video that I posted online. There is no way that he cannot know who murdered that guy. Violence is a very bad thing. But some violence, you cannot explain it. Look at the bombing in Chinoy. I talked about the bombing. These things are perceptions. And you are going to understand. The problem is when you start the game, but eventually, when the real godfathers of violence start, you don't know what is going to happen. So my understanding is the CCC thinks it's a strategy and it's working, but I don't know if it will backfire or not, because if it backfires, then they'll be in a big problem. And then let's go to, I want to look at the last one. Sikhala is the voice and leader of the masses. So ZANU-PF must put the house in order and clean their mess. I don't think Sikhala is the leader of the masses. Sikhala is one of the guys who's been in parliament for years, man. He's not the leader of the nation. Let's go to, well, he stayed in jail for a very long time without his family. And I can tell you, that's an unfair incarceration. And most people here don't know this, but my own father, when he was just a few years ago, when we were busy supporting Chamisa, was taken and was arrested for 6 months because I could not go to Zimbabwe. He was arrested for 6 months and he still stayed in jail. And to me, it looked like it was something happening on my behalf when the arrest happened. So don't think that I'm just talking this out of the blue. And the problem is most Zimbabweans operated with half the information. They understand one half of a thing when you need to understand the whole thing. What we need in Zimbabwe is a change of culture, both in the opposition and in the main political party, the ZANU-PF. And the change of culture that we need in Zimbabwe is everyone needs to understand the bigger picture of why our country is doing so bad economically, politically, and internationally. Why our country does not have a currency. These things need to be solved. So from the ZANU-PF side is the issue of sanctions. From the CCC side is the issue of accepting that the elections themselves are not an event, but they're a process, they're a thing that happens over 5 years. So when Chamisa loses the election today, you don't stop and say everything stops until the next election. Work together with the current government and you'll see that your entry into the government is going to be easy. But what Chamisa and his party do is when they lose an election, they say, let's stop everything until we win. Tongai Tuone, remember that Tongai Tuone strategy, Tendai BT strategy. Morgan Tsvangirai boycotts. This is the current situation that we have in Zimbabwe. Both the opposition and the ruling party, they don't know how to operate from the same platform for the betterment of the country. And then you end up with these situations that we have, where uncertainty, policy inconsistency, and incomplete projects just hang all over the country. No one wants to think long term. Everyone is thinking short term. And eventually, the situation in Zimbabwe is going to be solved by others. So it's going to be taken out of the hands of the people in Zimbabwe. That is what the Zambia playbook is. The situation in the country will eventually be solved by others who are outside ZANU-PF and outside CCC. People are going to come out and then they say, let's form this state force and let's remove these guys. Both of them are bad. Let us go in ourselves and do this. And you're going to see billionaires. You're going to see military people. You're going to see political figures coming together, trying to sort of like take over and make things happen. Right. I think this is it. This is a mixture of theory and legal. And I always want to give you my opinions of things. And I think Job Sikhala, it's said that is in jail for so long. I almost don't understand how he feels because he's been arrested for so long, so many times. And let's see what happens. I'll keep following this story and also follow the American visit by the CCC. What are the implications there? And whether America is going to be the new center. Remember, they tried to make Zambia the center. And President Hakainde Hichilema just doesn't have the, what can I call them? He doesn't have the guts to support the CCC. So he's afraid. He's not a military guy. Like, he's more of a business guy. Because what you need here for CCC needs someone who can give them muscle. This is the thing. And the visit to America is very, very significant for CCC and for ZANU-PF. So that is it. Thank you very much for watching this. Good night, and I'll be back probably Saturday or Sunday. Senator Kalibani Pugani is probably traveling. So if he's available Saturday, if he's not, we'll be back on Sunday. And as I said, I'm obviously making my move back to Zimbabwe. We're going to be setting up our studio there. And most of you will be able to come and join me in person. And obviously, we're doing construction projects. We're doing a lot. But these issues are very, very important that are happening in our country. Good night, and thank you, everyone, for watching.
Kuno aho pano mama wanna get it nice I know food I meso I know food I nzebe I know kaya marigi kama kwetu tikomo Don't come
Kamba kwe uyo anotara mari anogaya mari garai mamunzwa paninyaya pano zvamunoda kunzwa zvinotaurwa pano madiko kumunzwa mugova ne.com kamba kwe vanogaya mari vanotaura mari vanosiya mari kamba kwe vanotaura feya kuti pamberi zvichafamba sei vanoterere zvikubatsirei mukufamba kwenyu zvikubatsirei mirai ndikudze kuti chokwadi pano chizere kamba kwe vanogaya cash vanopa mafacts vanotaura straight vane evidence vane confidence plus intelligence
entertainment current affairs and news kamba kwe don't come usasarire kamba kwe anugaya